Okay, cool. So, hi everyone. Tonight it will be an introduction to Laravel Livewire. That word, introduction, okay? So I'm not an expert by any kind. So, let's go on. I've got a number of slides and there is a demo as well. I'll try not to go through too quickly because a friend of mine did a talk recently and he went through 72 slides in 18 minutes, which I thought was really impressive. Okay. Okay, so some introductions I made. I've worked with PHP since 2004. I'm working at a company called Finova in Bristol as a developer since 2021. And that was when I was introduced to Laravel. So that 17 years gap, I was just coding raw PHP. Okay, and I knew no better. I used to come to these meetings years ago and think I knew everything. And then people would start talking about Docker and stuff like that. And I would just go, not important, okay? And then suddenly I had to go to a new job, learn it all, and yeah, what a shock. Okay? So I'm not an expert on Laravel, used it for a couple of years, or Livewire, and I'm not an expert on PowerPoint as well, but at least they're readable. That's the main thing, I hope, you know. So what have we got? So let's go back a couple of years or decades, and I said, we want to create web pages and make them interactive so that the user has a good experience. So that means sometimes we've got to change the look and feel of a web page on the fly. Okay? This means hiding and showing sections of a page based on what you do, or you can change content of options of various things like widgets. Now, you don't want to be reloading a page every time you want this to change. It's too slow. So that's what JavaScript's for. Okay? So you've got JavaScript. So back in the olden days, okay, when I started, we would use raw.js to undertake this. But in 2006, something called jQuery arrived. Now, this made such tasks much easier to undertake, and my legacy projects are all still using jQuery. Our stuff at work still using it. It still works is the main thing. You can do lovely things with drag, drop, and all sorts. But, as I said, this still required the developer to take a deep dive into the DOM. So you've got to try and find the elements in the page, whatever means you want, to actually identify them and change them. Now, that's quite simple if all you're doing is just picking on a field and you want to do something with it. But then if you want to do something more complex, like you want to start adding elements to a page or removing them, then you're starting to clone things. It gets a bit messy. You've got to have ID tags maintained on the fly. It just gets a bit messy. So jQuery is great up to a thing. So, is there a solution? So I said back in 2011, Facebook developed something called React. In 2014, Vue appeared. Now, I'll say, without going into too much detail, these revolutionized the way front end was undertaken. So instead of the developer directly accessing the DOM to manipulate a web page, JavaScript objects were created and mapped to the document objects. Okay? So when you amend these JavaScript objects, be an array or whatever, the tools automatically updated the DOM to reflect the state. So that means you could do things quite easily, like have a JavaScript variable, like an array, which holds data, which it could then be reflected on the web page as a list, or some sections, or contents of a drop-down. But as the developer code then alters the JavaScript array, not touching anything to do with the document object model, these tools will then automatically update the front-end screen for you, and you don't have to do any of that. Great. Okay, so I've said great stuff. So surely this is all we need, yes? Right, opinions coming, okay? There's always a but. So you are a seasoned, or stuck, PHP developer, okay? And you have now been given one of these fancy tools to make front-end develop so much easier. So what's involved? Well, these tools require you to write all the front-end code in JavaScript. Yes, you've manipulated some DOM objects in the past and you've tinkered with a bit of jQuery, but this is a bit more involved. JS is a mature language. There's a lot to it. And there's lots of things to require you to learn it effectively. Lots of functions, lots of all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And if you're like me and you've just been pure PHP, it's like, wow, you know, I'm old. Why have I got to learn something new now? Okay? So you've got to install some extra stuff. You've got Node.js, Webpack or Vite, these tools. Node.js is the engine that will interpret the JavaScript you write, and then it will compile it into a form that the browsers understand. So all these Vue files or React files are all separate things. A browser doesn't understand that. So these tools actually have to compile them into like a giant JavaScript file, and then that's what the browsers understand. Okay, so you got that. And I said, did I mention compilation? Yep, every time you make a change to the JavaScript, the underlying Vue files, it's got to recompile it. Now you've got something like a watcher, and it'll sit there and go, oh, you've altered that file, I'll go and compile it. In the office, we were ended up waiting 15 seconds at the time for it to do the npm run watch and run it every time. We've got faster machines now, so it's not so bad. But it was a pain because you'd sit there, make a change, go to your browser, refresh the page, and nothing changed. You think, oh yeah, it's still compiling. Yeah? So you've got that. And then, of course, once you've the code's been compiled and it's passed, you refresh the page. Okay? So you've got that with there. So, I want this nice front-end stuff, this ability to change things easily, but I like PHP. So, what if there's some way I could do this, like React and Vue, but just using PHP, no JavaScript? Well, you've got Laravel Livewire. We're here now. So it was introduced back in 2020, version 1, but we're now on version 3, which was released last July. So let's crack on. And can anybody give me the answer to that? Why is it a jellyfish? No? Just random, I guess. All right. Okay. So, installation. It's simple. It's Composer. So you do need PHP 7.2 upwards, but I guess we're all there now, aren't we? We're all on 8 point something. Yeah? Right, okay, there's a lot of very nervous looking faces there out there, yeah? Okay. And you need Laravel 7+. So it's nothing more than a straightforward Composer Livewire install. And then after that, you can publish the configuration file so you can alter it in the projects. And that's just a straightforward artisan command to publish it, and then you can edit it. So that's that. So how do we use it? There is a demo coming soon. So Livewire uses its own components, which are embedded in Laravel Blade template. So it's all within Blade. So a Blade template can refer to one or more Livewire components, and these components can communicate with each other if you want to, using events and listeners. So to start, we just use an artisan command, and that's just PHP artisan make Livewire, and then the name of your component. So if we were going to replace it with the word counter, it gives us two files. It gives us the backend file, counter.php, the class, and then it gives us a blade itself to match. Okay, so you get two files. So before we go into it, let's just see briefly what's in these files. So if we start with counter.php, the one that's just been created, it's got nothing more than the namespace, and then it's got a class and a public function render, and all that does is it just outputs the associated Blade file. So that's all you get out of the box when you do it straight away. So what about the Blade file? It's not very exciting. So what you've got in here is a div with a random comment that it generates. Okay. Now, if anyone out there has used Vue 2, Livewire is the same. You must have a single div element on your page as the root. If you don't, it gets upset. Okay? So you've got like an empty template there to work with. Okay? So I'm just going to add some content here before we go in. So all I've done to the Blade file, we've got the outer div here. I've just thrown in heading 2 and another div. The heading is a simple counter, and in there it's just simply got a div with two buttons, with a plus and a minus button, and then a span around a variable within mustache syntax. Okay? And you'll see that each of the buttons have got a wire click with a name on them. Okay? So what we have is a variable and a span, and then we've got a class that gets a Blade class that gets applied when the count becomes less than 0, and we've got two buttons with the wire clicks, and basically what they will do is they will call methods. So if you were to look at the code behind this, I hope that's not too small. You've now got a public property called count, which matched our one on the page. Obviously, we've got our render, which was there already. But now we've got a function called increment and decrement, which matches the wire clicks. Okay? And all they're doing is just incrementing and decrementing. Okay? So any public property within a Livewire component is reactive. Okay? So you change it, Livewire will know that, ooh, I've got to update the front end screen with it. So remember, names of those two associated with name here and here. Okay, and then, before we get into something, how do we reference this component we've written in a Blade file? Ignore some of the chod at the top. Basically, all you have is just one line. And that is it. You just say Livewire, name of component. In the old days, you had to add in references to styles in JS at the top. That's all gone now. It's just nothing more than put that in there and it knows that's a Blade component, nothing more. Okay. Let's see this in action. Right, this is where it goes wrong. Okay, so I've got a demonstration. And this is where I change glasses now because I can't see anything close up. So bear with me, all you blurred people. Right, so what I can do is go across to here. And I'm hoping you can see what I see. This is that file you just saw. It's got the plus and the minus, and in between it's got the detail of the variable. So what I can do is hopefully make my mouse wake up. There you go, it's woke up, but it's nowhere to be seen. There it is. Okay, can you see that? So now if I just click here, that goes up. Okay, if I click backwards, it goes down. And look, it goes red because the class is applied. Now, if I just open the DevTools on the browser, and then try and click that, you'll see what it's doing is, it's not refreshing the page, it's just sending back a communication to the Laravel to say, look, I need to do something. So it sends back information to say, I've done a click, I need to call a particular method. That happens, and then what's sent back by the other one, so if I look at, say, the response, you'll get some details, and in the HTML bit, it will then re-render that part of the component. And then the front end replaces that component with the new data, including new values, any classes that have been associated, things like that. So it's doing that for you. Okay, just close that. I'm just worried that I'm going to be clicking things I shouldn't be. Okay, so it's all on the fly. I'm not worried about anything when I click on the front end. It's just doing it for me. So what's next? How about forms? Oh, it's big. I can see it with glasses. So form widget can be mapped in Livewire using wire model. Okay, so what you can do is you can have an input field, type text, and you can just say wire model equals name. And what that will do is in the back-end component, it will look for a variable called $name, okay, and then update that. Okay, and then you can see here we're outputting $name within the mustache syntax as well. Okay, so in the back end, we've got a public string called hello world, that's its default, and nothing else. Okay, all we're using is wire model live. So let's hopefully see if I can get this one up as well. So before anyone says anything, I'm only using VS Code because PHP Storm will ask me for more money if I put it on a different machine. Okay. Right. Yes. So what we got here is now a simple form, and you can see that hello world has been put in there automatically because the variable was set within the component as default. And you can see it says hello world over here as well, where my mouse pointer is jiggling around. Okay, but I can do PHP Southwest is ace. Okay, and you can see that it's updating. Okay, so without anything there on the front end, it's updating the stuff for you. Okay, so flicking back, we get to the stop right there 1 minute. So we said by now we know that when an event is fired, Livewire will call back to the server, update any reactive properties, and send back an updated portion of HTML, which will be displayed on the front end. Now, in that last demonstration I just did, this must be happening each time a key is pressed, and you saw that. I was pressing the keys and it was updating as it goes. That's not a good idea to be calling back to the server every time. Yeah, that's what's happening right now. Every key press I was doing, it was just going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. Not clever. So I said, you can control when these updates happen. So I was using wire model live against the field. And that means that the component is updated on each key press. But there are other options, and this list is not exhaustive. So you've got wire model. Update the component on submission of the form, and you can trap the form submission in Livewire and get it to do a method rather than doing a proper form submit. You've got blur. We all know what blur is. Basically, you leave the field, so it only does it then. You've got change. So if you're doing a select, like a drop-down list, it fires when you change the value, and lazy as an alias. And then if you are typing and you want it sort of live, you can put debounce in there and a number of milliseconds. So all that says is that if you haven't hit the keys for 250 milliseconds, then I'll do the change. So this is handy for like if you're doing a search box and you want a list that's automatically updating at type as you search, search as you type even. So you could type, and then as soon as you pause, then it goes off and does the call rather than lots and lots of calls all at once. Okay? So you've got that. You can control it. It doesn't have to be all the time. So what else have we got? So I've said, let's now trap the form submission. So as the form currently stands, a normal form, when you add a submit button and click it, the page will submit. That's just standard how a form works. But what you can do is you can trap it. So you add your submit button to the form. Okay, so yeah, input type submit, so that's your button. Okay. And then on the form itself, you can put wire submit equals method name. Okay. And then you finally create the method at the bottom with do submit. And what we've got here is a little variable here called submitted false. And then we hit this method, we set it to true. And up here you can see it says, if that is true, output a message. So, flicking back, the button's already there. And you can see the page hasn't refreshed. It's called back to that method. It's set that variable that called $submitted, and that then causes that message to come out. Okay? But that submit method to do your validation, obviously do all your database updates, whatever you want. So, to do. So in the Learning View 3 course provided by Laracasts, one of the first examples covered is a simple to-do list. There's two lists, outstanding completed items, plus an input box where items may be added. And you've got new items are added to the outstanding list, and then they have an unchecked checkbox and a remove button. So you can toggle the checkbox and it'll move it from one place to the other, okay, and remove just removes it from the list already. Now, this is all done using a single reactive array and a filter to determine which item belongs to, whether you've ticked it or not. Okay? And as you'll see in a moment, the adding of a new item, the toggling of items and removal are all done with methods within Livewire. And the text field for new items is a reactive property itself and is referenced by an add. Okay? And we've got some rules against this as well. Okay? So against each list item, we have a key. Just like with View, if you've got multiple items like in a list or array, you've got to have a unique ID for them. Otherwise, you could get unexpected results. So let's have a look at it and then I can bring up the code afterwards. So what I can do is go into and make it visible. Put it in there. Okay, so there's our to-do list. So all I can do is just do homework, add. And you can see it goes into the list automatically. Yeah, I can do things like do paper round. You can see I haven't grown up yet. Okay. And I'll just finally do the dishes. Unfortunately, I still do that. Okay, and you can see it's just added those, so I can just say, oh, I did my paper round, so I tick that, and you can see it goes straight across. Yeah, there's nothing on the front end to say move from here to here. It's just within one class. Yeah, I can just do things like X, X, X and add. And you get validation, just like with a normal Laravel page, it just comes up with the validation as well. So how's that done? I'll try my best to show in Livewire. What are we showing? A to-do list. This is where I've got to try and find all my code. Right, so. Of course, it's all hidden, isn't it? Right, so that's the blades. Fantastic. So to-do list blade. So what have we got here? What can we see? So we've got an input at the top, which is the new thing, and that's wire model new task. We've got a wire click add task, so that when you click the new one, it calls that method to add a new one. If you had an error come out of new task, then it shows the thing next to you in red, as you saw. Then in that, we've now got outstanding list, which is nothing more than an unordered list with a for each on an array called tasks. And you can see that basically it's filtering out ones that are not completed. Whereas down here, completed, is looking through the same tasks array, filtering only ones that are completed. Okay? And then when you do the wire click on each one of them, it just calls toggle task, sending through the task ID. Now, what's that doing in the back end now? So to-do list. Well, show me. Right, so what have we got in here? We have a public array of tasks, reactive array, and we have the string of new task, which is where you type in your new one. We've got the rules here, so you can see that on new task, it must be required minimum 6, maximum 255 characters. We have our methods then, so you've got add task, so it does the this validate, and if that passes, it then just simply adds to the tasks array with completed false the name of your new thing, and it's got the ID, which is just a unique thing, and then clears out the field that you typed into. And then, remember when I was clicking the text boxes, it was calling toggle task, passing through the ID. It's simply looking for the item in the array, and then it just simply sets the completed equal to not itself. And the fact it's reactive then knows, oh, something's changed, I'll just throw it all out again. And then remove task is simple, it just looks through the item in the array and unsets it from the array. But the fact that the array is reactive, all the front end is automatically refreshed based on the state of the array that you've now made it, whether you've toggled something to be incomplete or complete, or whether you removed it, or whether you've added something. Okay? There's no actual anything on the front end you've got to do all of that. It's all based on the reactive properties of the class. Right, so I move on. I'll try not to go too quick, you see, because that's what I'm Right, so next. Hide and show sections. This is something I use a lot. So you might have a page where you're selecting a drop-down, number of options, and then based on what you select, you want to show different other sections, yeah? Or widgets. So in jQuery, which we all know and love, you'd have an ID tag on a div, and when the onChange event fires on that select, you then toggle the CSS property to set the display to hide, show, or none, whatever, and the div and any form widgets within it. We've all done it, I'm sure. In a Livewire component, you just simply put a blade if directive around each div and use a reactive property in the if. The property is then wired to the select widget, and by using wire model change, or lazy, it's an alias, the event is only fired when that value is changed. So when you change it to select a new item within the dropdown. Right? And also, another thing we'll see in the code in a moment, the wire model automatically sets the current option in the widget. So I can set the value to 2 if I've got 1, 2, 3, and when I load up the page, Livewire will automatically, without me doing anything, set the drop down to the correct value. Okay. And this is just something which I found. The difference between jQuery method and this method is that with jQuery, you're just hiding and showing parts of a screen. If they're all within a form, even though you've hidden it and you hit submit, the PHP at the other end is going to see all those fields come through still, even though you couldn't physically see them on the screen, because you've just changed the display property. But however, with Livewire, it's completely different, because what you're doing is you're only outputting the sections you want to see. So any sections that are invisible really aren't on the page body and then won't be there. So let's have a look at that, shall we? So, show hide sections. This goes off the bottom of the screen, then I might remove that. So all we've got here is just nothing more than a select box. And if I just simply toggle it, it changes the different sections. They're all completely independent divs. Okay? But again, I've got nothing on the front end to say, oh, show and hide a certain div. That's all done at the back end. And how's it done? Well, let's have a go, shall we? So let's look at the blade. So what was it? Hide show sections. Let's have a look in that. So all we've got is a select box, as you saw, with 3 options. And it is wired to selected section, which is a reactive variable. And then, for each one of these divs in here, you can see they're all within if-end ifs. So if that selected section is 1, then output section 1 div. Otherwise 2, otherwise 3. It's all done in PHP. Okay? So as this selected section thing changes, it will affect the code here and display only the bits you want. Okay, what's next? Inter-component communication. There's a mouthful. Oh, yes, of course, sorry. Yes. Yes, of course you can. The component. Did I have a component? What was that? Show hide? Go on, show me it. It's not very exciting. It's just got one public int, and I set it to 2. That's how it knows what the default was. Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. Okay, inter-component communication. So the components can communicate with each other on a page via events and listeners. So the next one you're going to see is going to have a simple component that just has a button on it. When that button is clicked, the wire click event, remember we know now that when we've got buttons, we've got a click event, that will call a method in the component, which will then fire an event, and then something else will listen for that event. So on the counter component, the one we had first, you'll have $listeners. And that looks for any events to listen for, the ones you name, and the methods that they call. So if anyone's used view in the past, it's very similar. Yeah, you've got an event name and a method. Okay, so what this is going to do, it's not really exciting. It's going to just set a reactive property and then apply a red background. That's all it's going to do. So let's just see it working first, and then we can look at the code. I didn't put the code up on the screen because it would just get so small on a slide. So what are we doing? We've got to make it appear first of all, which is a good start. Component communications. This is where everyone's looking at the page now and going, yay, he's near the end. They can see the bottom of the file. Okay, right. So, what do we got? Intercommunication. So I've just got this. So if there's the counter. And it's gone red. It's exciting, isn't it? I can tell you're impressed. Okay, but that's basically one component talking to another one to do something. So how did that work? Well, what do we got? We've got the blades first. So component comms. So what do we got? Nothing exciting. Wire click, show red background. That's it on the front. Okay, so that's the one with the big button. But what did the component itself do? The component's up there. All right, component comms. Oh, don't be looking at that comment edit code. We'll get to that later. Okay, right, so we've got the show red background. Remember, the wire click called a function called show red background. And that's doing a dispatch background listener. So that's an event that's fired off. So something somewhere has got to listen for that. And that should be in the counter with any luck. So in the counter one, we've now got a protected property. It's an array. And that is the name of the event that we fired from the other one. And that's the name of the method in here that will be called. So it's going to call show red background, which is setting a variable called show red background to true, which was originally false. And then finally, if we look at the blade component itself for the counter, or the blade itself, counter. You'll see up here, you've got a class. Apply that class bgred if that variable or that method, or sorry, property is set to true. And of course, it's set to true by that method. So there you go. Okay. So what have we got left? Lazy loading. I like this one. So when a page is loaded, which contains multiple Livewire components, if any of these have a delay, it could be a DB query, a big thing like that, the entire page waits until all the components have been rendered. It's not good. So I can emulate this. So I could add a sleep to the mount method. This is a magic method on them. We'll cover those. On the component, we can emulate this problem. So I've got 2 seconds. I won't make you wait any longer. Okay, so what I can do is open up the component comms one. Oh, look, it's there already. I told you not to look at these ones. Okay, so we've now got a sleep. So if I now do that, and now refresh the page, 1, 2, and it's come back. But the whole page had to wait. Okay, nothing would load.
What happens if you click the counter? It's just doing the one component for the counter, it's not doing the other.
Yeah, what's happening is they're all loading now, but it's waiting for that bottom one because we've got a sleep on it. Okay, so that's come back. So that's not great. So what can you do? We can add lazy on. Okay, so we could go to the main file that I've been changing, and I can say, make this one lazy. Okay. So that one's probably off the bottom of the page, isn't it? So what I might do is hide 1 or 2, because otherwise you can't see it anyway. So if I remove to-do list, save that and refresh. Okay, no, that's still not good. Let's hide sections. Oh, right. Do that again. F5. 1, 2, boom, and there he appears. Okay, so the rest of the page loaded. So the other components are already there, and then he drops in later. Okay, so the page is not waiting for this one to come in. It just shows nothing until it comes in. But again, I'm still not happy with that. So we'll go back to here. So it would be nice for something to appear, wouldn't it? Yeah? So you don't want just a big gap there and people are just waiting and thinking, what's happening? Yeah? It'd be nice to show something. So what we've got is another method that comes with a blade component called placeholder. So if I go back to that component comms one, and undo this one. What that placeholder is doing, it can do anything, but I'm outputting a view called Livewire skeleton, which is just something I put together. And now when I refresh the page, you'll see it as a skeleton until it appears. So now you can have a skeleton there flashing and they can see, oh, something's happening, and then it'll come back later. Okay? So you've got that. Okay, components nested and in a loop. So you can nest components inside each other if you wanted to. And in addition to this, they can be placed into a loop, whereby each occurrence of the component in the loop is a totally separate entity. So it's its own thing. So I've got an example that will come up, which shows a component with a total, followed by a list of 3 counters. Okay, so as the subcomponents are rendered, 2 attributes are passed in as props. So you can pass stuff down into components via properties, and then if you want stuff up the other way, it's events. So a key and an item number. And then when we click the plus or minus buttons, when you'll see in a moment, they will emit an event supplying their current count and what item number they are. Okay, so you've got this count, my current one, dispatch, update total listener, sending through who I am and what my value currently is. And then decrement does the other way round. Okay, so let's see that. I think that must be the last one on the page. It is. And that's a little skeleton. Right, so what we've got now is one component called like the counter list, and that's basically starting from here and going to the bottom. And within that component, it's then referencing the same component 3 times in a loop, but each one of them is its own thing. And you can see total count of that is that. So I'll say 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so each individual one has its own number and its own attributes, but they're all sending an event up to the top the blade component, or sorry, Livewire component, and getting the total that way. So how are they doing that? Well, basically, if we look at the blade file counter list, so what you've got here is the little heading, a list of counters. We've got total, which is a reactive variable within the list component. And then it's just running through a count from 1 to 3. And then it's outputting a new sub-counter component. And it's passing down its count and its item. So what do these sub ones look like? They're very simple. They're like the other one. Okay, so they're just outputting what item number they are. So that was that hash. And then they've got nothing more than their buttons with increment and decrement. But if we look at the actual components themselves, so what was it? Sublist, subcounter. So we look at subcounter, you'll see, as we saw on the page, not only is it updating the count or decrementing it for its local component, it's also dispatching an event higher up to say, I want the total to be maintained based on what I've been doing. And then if we look at list counter, or counter list, you've got an update. Can't be at all, can it? No. Right, I thought something was missing there. Right, you've got the listener, which is update total listener, update total. And then look at update total. It's actually accepting 2 arguments because those 2 arguments were being supplied by the dispatch. And then all it's doing is saying, right, I've got an array, which is an array of all the counters I've got with their totals. So I've basically set the current count to the current element of that array, and then I put the total as an array sum across all the array. It's simple. And that's how that works. Okay, so props. You can pass properties from the parent blade component or the parent page, either as literal values or computed values by the use of the colon. So we've got the little syntax here that says I want to output my component called my component, and I want to pass 2 properties into it. Title is equal to that, and colon, initial value, equals that. So if you don't supply a colon, that is a literal, but if you do supply a colon, then that is actually a PHP expression. Okay? They can be anything, and then the properties are defined within the Livewire component class, and they're set just by being passed in. We briefly saw some lifestyle hooks, okay? So you saw a couple earlier on. You saw mount and you probably saw placeholder as I was going through. But there are other hooks. You've got boot, so that runs on every request after it's been instantiated, but before anything else is called. And you can use this for dependency injection. Construct method is not available. Okay, you can't declare a construct method inside a Livewire component and then start passing classes down through it. No. But with the boot method, you can pass all your DI through that way. Okay? Booted, so it says, runs on every request after it's mounted, but before any update methods are called. You saw mount, because we were using that to put a sleep in there. That runs once, immediately after the component is instantiated, but before the render is called. And that is only called once on initial payload and never called again. And then you've got updating, so that runs before any update to the component's data, and updated runs afterwards. And then finally, we know about placeholder. This is what happens when you can use the output information to the page before the component is fully mounted, like a loading message or a skeleton. Okay? And that's used in conjunction with the lazy attribute on components. And we saw how useful that was. Testing. So Livewire comes with a set of tools to allow you to test your components. So following example, test the counter component to ensure that when the plus and minus buttons are clicked, the counter value changes as expected, and any CSS classes are applied when it becomes negative, it goes red. Okay? This is extremely simple. This is just a normal PHP unit one. So it's just saying Livewire test, name of the component you want to test. Assert that you see a value of 0 on the screen. I then want to call the increment method, which is the plus. And I want to then see, I see a 1. It's straight simple, isn't it? Decrement, it should go back to 0. Decrement, I now want to see some HTML on the page that says I've employed a negative number class. That's it, really. And to run that, I could just PHP units. I'd get a delay on this laptop. I don't know why. There you go. Okay. So that's running. But what I always like to do is try and balls it up. Can I say that on camera? All right, okay. Too late now. So what I can do is test somewhere. There you go. So there's my one there. So I could do something like, oh, well, if I assert C, I click increment, I want to see XXX, for example. Will that work? And of course it doesn't work. And it now tells you that you're expecting something and it doesn't contain XXX. Put it back. And everything should be okay. Good. Okay, tool stack. Okay, so you've got a full stack development solution used for building. Okay, that's just taken off a web page somewhere. Tool stack contains 4 parts: Tailwind CSS, Alpine.js, Laravel, and Livewire. So it's like a full stack that you can use to actually build your applications. So this will be the equivalent of like Vue's, I can't remember what you call them now. Something we use and I don't like. It'll be on one of my slides in a moment anyway. And I've put a pros and cons, massively opinionated thing, okay? Pros and cons of using Vue.js and React. So the benefits, of course, they're mature. They've been around for over 10 years. They've got a big community following. Instant updates, no server round trips. You're dealing with JavaScript on the front end, so you can do a lot. And you can, that's the other one. You can make use of systems such as Ant Design. That's something we use, which contains out-of-the-box components and widgets. But the drawbacks, it's a learning curve. If you've not really done anything with JavaScript in the past, you've got to learn that. I'm old. I don't take well to change. Okay. Compilation, depends if it's fast or slow. Documentation can be hit or miss. Ant Design's documentation is, yeah. I'll leave it there. And the other thing is the heavy lifting is pushed to the browser. Okay? If you've got a really complicated Vue application, it can generate some quite big JavaScript files. and they're all pushed to the front initially. So you haven't got a fast browser, you've got a bit of a delay there. I don't know how it operates on phones. You know, heavy lifting's there. Let's go the other way. Livewire. So benefits, less of a learning curve if you know Laravel, no relearning. Less setup. Okay, let's just install it and you're away. No compilation. Obviously PHP is interpreted, it just does it on the fly. And the documentation is really good. And it's backed up by Laracasts, things like that. So drawbacks, you can't use certain ecosystems and design. Although the documentation's terrible, the actual components are brilliant. Some specific applications require instant updates without waiting for a server response. So we've got in our office some really good Vue stuff. And it's really quick because it's all happening without waiting for a server response because it's all happening with JavaScript. So swings and roundabouts. And there's less separation of presentation and application layer. So traditional approach is to use an API. So we use Vue.js in our company, and that's using then GraphQL to talk to the back end, but they are completely separated, whereas this is all together. Okay. Did I miss one? No, I didn't. I'll be glad to say I've reached the end. Okay, I've supplied a few links there. So you've got the website and documentation. There's the Livewire 3 release video with all the new stuff they put into it. You've got some Laracast courses there, which you should be able to access even if you're not a paid up member. You've got the tool stack. And then finally, me, although it's a lot easier, just find me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for your time.
Does anyone have any questions?
The question is, if you had, I don't know, something that had to be JavaScript, like I don't know, like a drag and drop, something. But is there a way that it could then communicate that it's done something to update another panel, or like somehow communicate back with the Livewire thing?
Yeah, I know that there are hooks into to JavaScript as well, so you can communicate with it. But I haven't covered that in here. But yes, I've certainly seen that. Yeah, because
and it exposes something that $wire property. To use Alpine at all, it has weird directives a bit like. So you get a $wire property, and all the public properties are available under you can sort of block the events and respond to them in JavaScript as well. So if, say, you're counting, you wanted to make it update in real time, but still round trip to the server so the PHP is the updated value, you can kind of write the JavaScript through that tiny little update so it's instant, but still send it back. So you can kind of a bit.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I wonder if you could talk a bit more about debugging strategies on the basis that if it's pure PHP, you get the lovely little error message coming out onto the screen. But when you've got this stuff going back and forth by this hidden, almost like magic system, how do you, well, I've briefly mucked about with a bit, how I got stuck because I wasn't getting the error messages back when the components were reporting back to the browser.
Yeah.
What your method, what your strategies might be for.
I can answer that really easily. And the answer is, I don't know, I've not done it. Yeah, I've not used debug with it.
If you use the Laravel, it's a telescope. It's a telescope's debug part. If you had that installed, I think that will pick up errors that happen from a component load and puts a full page module up with the error in. I think I certainly have them. I'm not 100% sure where they come from. I think it's from Telescope. So there is stuff. But it is definitely still harder.
Cool.
Your method, Zen, the parents and
Yeah.
when you click on the child is rendered. I'm assuming that the parents is rendered as well.
Yes.
So what's happening with the other two children? Do you render all the children, or just the parents, or single child?
That's a good question. I don't know, to be honest, because you can't see anything happening on the page, so it's difficult to work that out. I'd have to look into it. Yeah, I see what you mean, because you're rendering the top one. Yeah, to get the total out. Yeah. don't they?
It will be rendering all of them, and it will probably be double rendering the one you clicked. So the one you clicked will re-render because you clicked it.
Yeah.
As it bubbles the event up, it will render the wrapper one, so then it will do them all. If you put the bit at the top in its own component, so the actual wrapper component doesn't display anything or have any properties, you then end up with 4 children. So the 3 list components could fire the event and then have it picked up by like a header component.
Yeah.
And then that would get around that problem. You just update the component that changed into the other one. It is smart enough though in that scenario that, like React, it does, I don't know exactly how React works, some magic with shadow DOMs. It doesn't do full like replacements of the whole DOM. It still just to a large degree can find what's changed and not kind of swap big chunks out. Like it doesn't jump around like it would if you did it in jQuery where you kind of chop part of the page up.
Yeah, if you look at that video for the release 3, they actually talk about that. They've completely changed how it re-renders stuff to make it a lot more quicker and smarter. Okay.
Oh, was there quite a significant change between the versions of Livewire? You said it was. And is there likely to be more significant changes? As in, if we stop using this, could it be a maintenance?
There were a couple of changes I found with just the way how you did things. But with everything, just like with Laravel, you've got an upgrade document that tells you exactly what the changes are and what you need to do to change. Yeah, there was a couple, but not a major amount.
They're largely additions and enhancements that are Livewire through. So like the lazy loading thing, you used to have to write all your own outbound properties. You used to have to put JavaScript in on load to update a property. And then in your play template, you'd be like, if this property is true, then otherwise display code that says it's true. Right. It worked, but yeah, it's now magic.
Yeah.
So normally we got backend, front-end, and the middleman, which is the API. Do you need the API in this case? You still need the API, you don't need the API.
But that comes with it, when the page is rendered. Do you mean the bit that's doing the communication between the two?
I need to query database, okay? And the query will change based on what you click.
Yeah.
The component. Do I need again an API in the middle? Do you need the Livewire component to call the API and then from the web doc? So it looks like you don't need the API anymore.
No, well, I've not used an API in the past. It's just the magic, put the rep component on there, and if the variables are reactive, they will control, if you change them, then it does it. I've not come across any sort of like extra stuff you've got to do. But I have come in straight into version 3, really. I only very, very briefly looked at V2. Hardly looked at that, so I wouldn't have thought so. Anything you are aware of, Ben?
No, you don't probably. So a common thing I've encountered is you find that you want instant updates. So then you end up just a small part. Normally it's like a really key bit of your application that everyone's using all the time. You'll decide it needs to be React or Vue, so then you end up doing little bits of API just to support that. Then there is, so you haven't covered particularly, if you put between requests, it serializes the component, so it pretty much runs it through PHP's serialize method and then unserializes it on the way out. So, like, I certainly would commonly have a component that has an eloquent model in it, and certain things you do won't auto-serialize, so you sometimes have to do some of the config you would do for an API to make sure it serializes and unserializes cleanly, or you can like just store the IDs in your component and like reload it. There's various approaches, but sort of some slight overlap with things you might encounter and think about on an API. But you only really need an API if you actually want to drop out of Livewire and JavaScript a piece of it.
Right, okay. Nothing more. Let's wrap it up. Thank you. Bye.